there's 3 levels of communication. The first level, and I think probably 95% of the people are really good at that, and it's what I call informing. You know, you can actually take classes about how you stand up on a stage and body language and hands and eye contact, all that, but in the end, you're still using your body, right? I remember I was in a conference room, and you know, back in my corporate days, Executive VP Larry's in the room, and this guy's presenting on some topic, and about 10 minutes into the presentation, you just hear, right? I mean, like a chainsaw. Larry's like, and everybody in the room is like embarrassed, like, you know, Larry, my God, you know, he's an executive VP, and I'm like, forget Larry, the other guy who's presenting put him to sleep, you know, blame him. But he, you know, 95% of the presentations we do in a business corporate environment is really informing somebody of our point of view. And that's really using the body, your ears, your eyes, your mouth, etc. And then the second level of communication is really called communication, where your brain kicks in. That's where people are communicating with their brains, asking questions, even kind of finding out why is that person even asking that question, right? And then what John talks about connecting is the third level, and that's really like the masters do it. And you don't connect with your brain, you don't connect with your body, you connect with your heart. And you connect with your heart through the wonderful stories that you hear. John shares this one story about one of the principles, I'm sure it's going to be in his new book, is the way you connect with somebody is to do something for them that they can't do for themselves. So he's got this wonderful story about his grandson is born, and he's in the delivery room, and his son-in-law says, John, would you mind cutting the umbilical cord? And John's like, oh my God, you know, I can pack an audience, I can do everything, but this is the one thing I can't do for myself. What an honor to cut the umbilical cord to his grandson. And that's how you connect. You connect through the heart. You connect through stories. And that's, you know, it's not about you, it's about the other person.
All right, thank you. So, we'll talk about influence today, and influence is what makes the world go around. About 15 years ago, my daughter, who was a teenager at the time, she said, Dad, you gotta come watch this TV show with me. So I'm like, all right, well, you know, your teenage daughter asked you to watch a TV show, you plop down, TV goes on, and this really handsome young man standing in front of this villa, and one by one, limousines are pulling up and these gorgeous girls are getting out, right? And as you haven't guessed it by now, he was the bachelor. Oh. So, don't judge me. I know I'm ashamed, but when your teenage daughter asks you to do something, you do it. And then, as you've watched the show before, whenever somebody gets out of a limo, they see their names, what city they're from, and their job title. So a while ago, probably maybe about 6-7 months ago, I'm channel surfing and I see, oh, The Bachelorette. So I said, okay, let me click on it and see what's happening. And it's the first show again. This time, it's the young lady that's standing there, and the guys are getting out of the limo one by one. And I'm looking at the occupations, and 15 years ago, it was like accountant, you know, pharmacist, sales executive. And now, like every fourth guy is an influencer. So if it's an official occupation on The Bachelor, then it exists.
I figured out that once I met John Maxwell, that a lot of things that I was doing right or a lot of things that I was doing wrong was because of my leadership. And then I figured out that the relationships that I formed and how I made all the difference in the world. So when I met John, I became a student of leadership. Specifically, I became a student of servant leadership. And once I figured out that it wasn't about me as a leader, but it was something about much bigger than me, it was about empowering people. It was understanding how to lead myself before I can lead others, which, by the way, is not easy. And then leading others is not really the end game. The end game is really developing leaders in your organization. And when you develop leaders in your organization, it takes a special person to do that, because a lot of people are afraid of that. They're afraid if I develop a leader that works on my team, maybe they displace me and I don't have a job anymore. But that's okay. You can get hit by a bus tomorrow, you won't have a job anyway, so they can take your place, right? So And then the other thing that I found is once I mastered the understanding that I can be vulnerable, I can be transparent, and I can be real with my people. And they can get me and they can understand me, even if I'm not perfect. That's where my leadership took off and became exponential. I remember this story where I was just finishing up Prague and moving to Latin America, and my CFO basically said to me, Tom, I just want to thank you for believing in us, but more importantly, I want to thank you for making us believe in ourselves. That was the nicest thing anybody ever said to me. And that was the same team that I came in, and they were losing $2.5 million a year, and 3 years later, the company was generating $4.5 million in revenue. $6 million swing in 3 years, because everything rises and falls in leadership. So I'm not going to bore you with any of my stories. I got a lot of stories of how I failed and I succeeded, but you got a full day ahead of you. You already heard some of the great speakers here today. Somebody likened Lift to Lead to like a drinking from a fire hydrant. So there's a lot of material. Overwhelmed. Okay, I got to stand on this side. Don't get overwhelmed, and just 3 questions. Write down on a piece of paper. If you check these 3 today, you'll be just fine. So, what have I learned? What am I going to do? And who am I going to meet? What have I learned? What am I going to do? And who am I going to meet? Right? And then you'll be fine.
We got some great speakers today. Back in 2002 is when I first met John Maxwell. 2002, I was an expat. We were living overseas. And we've been at this, probably about 10 years. We're outside the country, and my wife, Kathy, said, hey, why don't we buy a house in the United States? Actually, my youngest daughter was born overseas. So we said, let's buy a house in the United States so the kids can have a sense of belonging to the U.S. So we bought a house in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, because Florida was always warm and it was a short flight, well, not a short flight, but a reasonable flight from Europe. So we buy a house in Florida, and I was traveling a lot. The kids enjoyed it, Kathy enjoyed it, but I was traveling I was probably in that house maybe 20 days a year. So probably about a handful of times we went to this local church called, in Palm Beach Garden, called the Christ Fellowship. Great little church. They had this pastor, Tom Mullins. Fantastic spouse. I used to love going there, listening to him on Sundays. Just a lot of sensible information, meat and bones that you could really chew on and really apply to your life. And one Sunday we show up, and Tom is not speaking. I was like, oh man, I love Tom. I get to hear him like maybe a handful of times a year, and he's not here. Who's this guy, John Maxwell, that's substituting for him, right? So John, if you ever hear him speak, so I go, we're watching him, and I'm going to try to kind of imitate. It's difficult to imitate John because John is John, but if you ever seen John speak, he's always got this little high chair. So John sits in his high chair. He's got his little table here. He's always got his little bottle of water. He's got his tablet, and he starts off. He says, "Hi, I'm John, and I'm your friend." That's how he always starts out. And he had just launched his book, Today Matters. And he said something like really simple, but it was, so true. He says, yesterday, it's over. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't change it. You may learn from it, but it's done. And he says, tomorrow is really overrated. So the only thing you got is today. And today matters. In fact, what you do today will determine what you'll be working on tomorrow. Because if you get it right, tomorrow you can go on to bigger and better things. But if you mess it up, tomorrow you get to do it all over again. And I'm like, oh my God, that's epic. It's like, wow, that's the best thing I ever heard. So John got me hook, line, and sinker that day. I drank the Kool-Aid. And I've been with his organization since. I'm part of the Maxwell leadership team. And it's just helped me grow over the last number of years. Like, frankly, 10 years ago, if you asked me, Tom, are you going to have a book? I would have no idea I had a book. Right? So now I have a book. I'm on podcast probably about 5-6 times a month. And it's getting sold globally. So, and the one thing about John is every event he ever has, and I've been in corporations and I've been to corporate events and conferences, And John's events are just as good, if not better than any of those events.